Hello and welcome, Inspired Podcast community. This is your new episode. My name is Caroline, and my today's guest is Mark Graban, and I'm so happy he said yes to our interview. How are you doing today?
Great, Caroline. Thank you for the invitation to be here.
Wow, amazing. And I would love to introduce you to the audience, of course. You are a consultant, author, and speaker specializing in lean management and continuous improvement across industries like healthcare and manufacturing. Known for fostering psychological safety and employee engagement, you help organizations enhance performance and resilience. Since 2010, you have worked independently and as a senior advisor at, and you have to help me, is it KNexus?
KNexus.
KNexus, a technology company. Welcome to the Inspired Podcast, Mark Graban. KNexus. Okay.
Yes, but it's great to be here again. Yeah, excited to talk with you and your audience.
Yes, and my first question is, how do you approach creating a culture of psychological safety in diverse organizational settings?
Yeah, so I think, first off, psychological safety, to define that, means basically a person's feeling or perception that they can speak in the workplace without fear of being punished or marginalized in some way. So that would include speaking up to point out problems, to share ideas, to even disagree with a colleague or a manager. Like, do you feel that that is welcome and rewarded? And so what leaders really must do to cultivate that environment is three things. So first, model the behaviors that you would want to see from your team. So it's very powerful, and our leaders at KaiNexus do this well. They say things like, I made a mistake, I was wrong, or even more powerfully, I might be wrong, so let's go test this idea, or I might be wrong, what input do you have? So first off, modeling behaviors like that. Secondly, encouraging others to do the same. Encouraging people to speak up, to disagree, to admit mistakes, things like that. And then thirdly, when employees do that, we need to reward them. And that doesn't mean literally handing them money, but it means reacting in a way that's far more positive than just tolerating people speaking up. Like, people really have to feel like it is welcomed and rewarded so that they'll continue that. So there's this spectrum of psychological safety. It's not yes, no, safe, unsafe, but how safe do you feel? And the way that leaders and colleagues interact with you will either build that sense that you have that it's safe to speak up, or unfortunately could make you feel less safe.
Yes, I understand. It's about communication, I think. And you mentioned also the importance for a leader to act as a role model.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, modeling excellence. I remember this. We studied this when when I was younger.
Yeah.
Then
And I would say, we're not trying to model perfection, because none of us are perfect. I think people know their leaders are not perfect, and it's when people feel like they have to pretend that they're perfect that creates a lot of problems.
yes, that's true. I just had a conversation about imposter syndrome. It's a little bit like that, when you think you are not good enough and then you act as if, and people recognize this from you immediately. So, yeah, how important is authenticity in all that thing that you teach us? Because in the beginning, how is it when people learn how to act accordingly as the leader?
Yeah. Well, I think, authenticity is that's a great word to talk about, because when we feel a sense of psychological safety, we can act authentically, that we can speak when we want to, or when we feel like we need to speak up. But that doesn't, we have to do so respectfully. So that's, I think, the other side, the other word that's important, to be authentic, but respectful. And I think, to leaders, when we talk about the idea of rewarding people for speaking up, that doesn't mean we need to agree with everything an employee says, But if we welcome dissent or disagreement or other ideas, hopefully we're discussing the merit of the ideas. And the best ideas or the best combination of ideas is what we choose to move forward with, instead of the ideas that come from the most powerful person in the situation. So part of that authenticity is not, we're not telling leaders to be, obnoxiously positive about everything. Let's say if Caroline, you made a suggestion that I think is a bad idea, I don't have to say, oh, Caroline, that's great, and then ignore the idea. That, people are going to see through that. Like, oh, the boss always tells me I have great ideas, but they never do anything with the ideas. People might stop speaking up, not because of fear, but futility. Like, yeah, I speak up, but it doesn't lead to anything. So maybe I won't do that again. So I think leaders can be authentic. They can be respectful. Let's say if an employee suggests something that isn't possible because of, let's say, legal or regulatory or safety issues that they're not aware of, we can gently push back and help them understand. Like, I can understand, thank you for sharing that, and respond in a way that's direct and authentic, that I think won't lead to someone feel punished for having said something. I think that's important.
Yes, I think we can appreciate that they had the courage to speak up
Mm-hmm.
in the environment you created or you help companies to create.
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah, and I think it's about cultivating that environment through actions. So leaders can't. What doesn't work is leaders saying things like, "This is now a safe space. We're now going to start speaking up about mistakes." If people don't feel like that's actually safe, all of the encouragement in the world might not lead to anything. So again, I think it really starts. What's more effective is modeling and leading the way and encouraging people, and then following up in ways that feel like a reward, not a punishment.
Yes, absolutely. And that reminds me of that most of the communication is nonverbal, right? Like 90% or something. And then people recognize when it's not authentic, or it's just on the someone says something and acts in a different way. That also reminds me of tell them, but show them first, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
Yeah, and I've made mistakes in the past where I wasn't careful with my body language. Right, I was thinking of like, well, I want to say the right thing, but my opinion already showed on my face, and that might have felt like a punishment to somebody, of either my face was saying you shouldn't have said that, or that was dumb. And I think, yeah, that's a great point, that we should be mindful of not just what we say, but our nonverbal reactions as well.
Yes, and that requires training, of course.
Yeah, or and again, to the idea again that none of us are perfect. If we realize by someone's reaction that we've reacted badly, that we've made a mistake as a leader in terms of our words or expression, I think the best thing we can do is apologize.
Yes, that's a great idea. Also to yeah, in Germany we would say to name the elephant in the room. I don't know if that
Yeah,
exists. That
yeah,
if there is a topic, it's everyone sees it, but no one talks about, then we just name it, and yeah, and we can talk about that.
yeah.
That way it goes away, I would say. And my next question is, what key lessons from your work in healthcare can be applied to other industries focused on quality and continuous
Hmm.
improvement?
That's a good question. I think one concept or practice that's becoming more common in healthcare is actually something that has some origins in aviation, I believe. But it's this concept and framework called just culture, JUST. The longer phrase, the creators of this mindset call it fair and just culture, meaning, are we as leaders, as an organization, reacting to problems or mistakes and failures in a way that's fair and just to the employees. And I agree, so there are frameworks. And as an engineer, I like a good flow chart or an algorithm of say, something has gone wrong. Let's say a patient has been given the wrong medication. And there are some questions that you can ask and go through and basically try to determine, was this incident caused by a systemic problem? Things like communication, technology, processes, and systems. Would another employee in those same systems made the same decision that turned out to be a mistake? If so, it would be unfair and unjust to punish the individual for a systemic problem. And the algorithm, there are some cases where, if you're asking, would it be fair and just to punish somebody for their actions, a lot of it comes down to a matter of intent. Right. So rare instances where a nurse or somebody else in healthcare is intentionally trying to harm a patient or end their life because they think, they want to put someone out of their misery. Like, intentional actions become a matter of law based on whatever country you're in, assault or murder. We should be punishing crimes and intentional actions. But there are a lot of situations where leaders, I think, unfairly punish an individual when they had no intent to harm somebody. That employee or employees were as much a victim of the bad systems as the patient. That we shouldn't compound a bad situation by reacting in a punitive way, because that undermines our ability to learn. If something bad, we should be preventing quality problems and safety issues and mistakes that would harm anybody. But then if we fail in that effort, we need to emphasize learning and the prevention of future problems. What's done is done. And I think, unfortunately, if the emphasis is on punishment, then people learn that when they can get away with it, they're better off hiding or covering up a mistake. And then we certainly won't be learning and improving. And in healthcare, a lot of the types of incidents that occur happen over and over because there's more punishment than learning. But, I think people in other industries, back to your question, final thought on it. I think a lot of times people in manufacturing or other settings aren't familiar with this idea of just culture. And I think the same mindsets would apply if it came down to, somebody damaged a car in an assembly plant. Was there intent? Was it a systemic problem with the tools or equipment? Or we really need to focus on learning and improvement more than punishment.
Yes, I love what you said about, yes, focus more on you said the learning aspect, or then everyone can learn from that. Not only the
Right.
individual gets punished that did a mistake. This reminds me of the education, the in the family as a child, when you grow up and then you get punished for something. So the opposite would be rewarding someone. And I think you mentioned this in the beginning when we talked about speaking up or sharing ideas, something, and that we get rewarded, or another word would be incentive or something. You get incentive. Mm, Yes, something like that. Okay, I have another question for you.
Okay.
How do you adapt lean and people-centered leadership principles for emerging sectors like technology startups?
Yeah. So I've been involved with one company in that category of startup shifting. I mean, into not so much a startup, but a company that continues to be a fast-growing small technology company. That company is KaiNexus, and I think even though it's a different environment than manufacturing, we are not producing 1,600 cars a day. We are not treating hundreds of patients. We are developing and delivering and supporting software. But I think a lot of the cultural elements of lean management have been really important within KaiNexus and really effective. So, the co-founders who I started working with back in 2011 were very aware of the need to really think about what culture are we creating, of not just letting culture evolve, but to be intentional about it. So being of a continuous improvement mindset themselves, one idea was, well, we want to be a continuous improvement culture. That also leads to innovation, a related word to improvement. I think if you're creating something brand new, we might call that innovation. Whereas, you may be improving something that already exists. So I think our co-founders, and as the company has grown, other executives lead with humility. They don't pretend to have all the answers. They don't pretend to be perfect or always correct. They really focus on psychological safety and learning from mistakes. So when we've discussed this and observed behavior and even surveyed staff, like one question I like to ask if I'm doing talks or surveying a group is, like, what reaction do you expect to mistakes in your workplace? Either a punitive response or a reaction that we might call nice in English, so the one that's focused on feelings of like, well, Caroline, I know you didn't mean to do that. Please don't feel bad. It's okay. And then I think better than nice is a reaction that you might call kind, which would be more constructive. And we might say the things about, I know you didn't mean to do it, but then we follow it up with learning and prevention. Like, how do we learn from this? How do we share this? How do we prevent the mistake from happening again? And we surveyed, this was pretty recently, about 45 people in the company. Not a single person said, and this was an anonymous survey, not a single person said they expect a punitive response. And then people felt safe to joke about, like, I hope nobody was afraid to answer the question honestly. I think everyone was answering the question honestly. But then of the other 45 people, it was pretty evenly split between nice and kind, right? So we're still moving in that progression, which helps KaiNexus do better as a company, because we can be open, we can be focused on learning and improvement. We've done more formal surveys on the level of psychological safety that people feel within the company, and the scores were pretty good. We were in about the 80th percentile, compared to other, benchmark companies. So I think there's a solid culture. It's one that's focused on customer focus, problem solving. I think kind of core principles of leading and treating people with respect. Things that you might consider, core elements of the Toyota Way management system or lean management. It's been incredibly applicable and really helpful within a tech company like KaiNexus.
Thank you so much for sharing. Okay, you pointed out in the beginning the differences between the three industries: healthcare, technology, and what was the third one?
Manufacturing.
Yeah, the assembly line with the 1,600 cars per day. I love that so much. I also like, a diversity or diverse workplaces. And then you pointed out, as a startup, they have to build the culture, and then of course first as reverse engineering from the end vision, so to say, reverse engineering, what culture do we want to implement? Wow, I love that so much. I never thought of it that way, that it all starts in the beginning. So you enter a company and everything is already arranged. This is when it's an established workplace already, but it's very interesting to witness this from the beginning, of course, that we have a choice, and that is the name of the podcast also. Inspired choice. We get to choose what workplace we want to create. Yes, thank you so much for sharing. You mentioned several times the word intention or to intend. And my next question is, do you set goals for yourself or intentions? And what is one of your next projects?
Oh, for me personally. So I think some of my ongoing goals are related to the last two books that I wrote and published. I'm going to run off screen quickly. One of those books that was published in 2018 is called Measures of Success. And last year, I published my most recent book called The Mistakes That Make Us, which is about learning from mistakes. Measures of Success is a book about how to better understand our company systems and key performance indicators, and how to make sure we're not overreacting to every up and down in our performance. We use these methods and mindsets also within KaiNexus. But some of my goals, I think, as an author, somebody who is trying to pass along ideas that I've admittedly learned from others and put into practice, and I feel very passionate about. Writing a book is one thing, but some of my goals include creating other opportunities to help leaders and their teams in organizations, whether that's things I already do, speaking at company leadership events, doing training or workshops or coaching or longer projects with organizations. Some of my goals for 2025 are to kind of improve the way, I have to improve some of my marketing and ways that I get these ideas in front of people to hopefully spark, not just reading a book, but trying to find ways to actually work together in a deeper way. So those are some of the things I'm focused on. Again, I started my career in manufacturing, and then I've been involved in 2 different tech companies, and then done a lot of work in healthcare over the last 20 years. So, some of my goals are just to try to engage and help more people in different ways.
Wow, I love that. I also love books. Thank you so much for sharing. I put it in the show notes, and I created an Amazon list for all the books from my podcast guests as well. Thank you so much. I had another thought. It is gone. You talked about the marketing. So I think this is why you are doing podcasts as well, right?
I think, both hosting podcasts. So a related podcast to the book. There's a podcast I've been hosting since September 2020 called My Favorite Mistake, where I've interviewed guests from different industries. I've had a couple of guests from Germany, international guests sharing a story about a mistake that they made in their career and how they learned from it. That's really what we're emphasizing. But I love doing podcasts. I still do a lot of writing, on my blog and on LinkedIn. And, I think there's different ways of trying to share ideas. The one thing I've never really tried is TikTok. I don't like doing video as much as I like doing writing and podcasting.
You missed something. So I started TikTok during COVID. My kids told me you have to have an account. I was shocked in the beginning, but you get used to, and it's very fun because not many people do this. So you can reach also different people. Yes, I highly recommend, of course, to test this, and maybe this is your biggest mistake. I have to.
It might very well be a mistake. I've started doing more with YouTube and Instagram videos. So at some point it's exhausting to have so many different accounts and so many, different platforms. But I should try new things, continue to try new things. Podcasting, I started podcasting in 2006. That was a very new thing to be doing then.
I didn't know they existed because I always said 2007. This is when maybe in Germany, because I bought the first iPod in 2007.
Yeah.
So I remember this year we are a little bit behind then. Okay, thank you so much for our interview. I learned so much, and of course, now is time for your final thoughts to the audience, please.
Oh, well, thank you, Caroline. I hope I've shared a few ideas that, thinking to the theme of your show, that help people make some inspired choices, whether that's, I think KaiNexus had the inspired choice of focusing on culture and being very intentional about that. I think we can be, have some inspired choices about how we react to mistakes. Leaders might, it's difficult to change habits. If people have a habit of getting upset, getting angry, punishing people when mistakes occur. Hopefully they'll think of kind of trying a different approach, because I think there is a lot of data and research out there that leading in ways that cultivate psychological safety and learning from mistakes are not just you'd say the right way or a nice way to treat people. It really leads to better business results, and I think that's what makes it an inspired choice.
Wow, thank you so much for mentioning. And I would say, please reach out to Mark. Choose to reach out, choose the books. He's amazing. He has information not many people have, and he's willing to share this with us. Thank you for inspiring us today.
Oh, thank you. Thanks, Caroline. It was great to be here.
And see you in the next episode.